Hey everyone, and welcome to Pit Stop 11. Today we're joined by Andy Nguyen again, and we're going to be talking mentorship. How to find mentors, and more importantly, how to get the most out of mentors. And as we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to Darnell, who's a mutual friend of ours, and he suggested this topic, and so really glad that he did because I think it's a really important one.
It is, and I think it's one of those things where if people aren't talking about it, they're thinking about it, mentorship. And so I hope that this conversation today between you and I sparks something in people listening where they'll maybe take some sort of an action towards mentorship, whatever that ends up looking like for them.
For sure. And, the other thing I wanted to point out too, which just came to mind, was how ambiguous a lot of times mentorship is.
Yes.
A lot of times the entire advice or the idea is find a mentor and that's it. Right. And so going into a little bit more of the details of, what does a mentor look like? What kind of mentor should you be looking at? Do mentor-mentee relationships look different for different people? And just breaking that down a bit. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, man. I'm this subject, kind of like the last one that we had around purpose. Like these subjects, they have a really close spot in my heart. So when you mentioned the mentorship, something in me lit up. So I'm also super excited to dive into this with you.
Awesome. And so I guess the first question that I had was, what is your what have your relationships with mentors been? Some of the mentors you've had in the past, what they've looked like. If you could just go into some of those.
Yeah. So mentorship for me it's never looked linear, if that makes sense. Like it was never black or white.
Okay.
Um, and I can get into details after, but some mentors that I've had kind of fell into my life indirectly. Like I never was seeking them. Other mentors I sought out. There are also mentors that I would regard them as people that I don't even know. Like I don't even have a personal connection with them. However, I still see them as a mentor. And again, we can get into that, right?
For sure.
But yeah, like I would say that in this season of my life, mentorship has been a lot more intentional for me because there's specific things in my life or specific aspects of me that I want to dive more into and uncover and grow. And so with that desire comes the desire for different types of mentorship and its role in my life as something that's of higher importance.
For sure. And can you
Yeah.
highlight maybe a couple of I would just say influential, either whatever that means to you, mentors that you've had, and just a quick overview of what you were looking to get from them,
Yeah.
kind of the topics that you guys were looking for, things like that.
Yeah, totally. I'll start with one that the first person that comes to my mind. His name is Ben Goreski. So he is one of the leaders at the Samurai Brotherhood based out of Vancouver. He also has a podcast called Evolving Man. He's an addictions counselor. And I heard about Ben through his podcast actually. Started listening to a lot of his different episodes. It became a regular podcast for me. Started learning a lot. He put out an announcement once that he was starting an online men's group. And right away, I thought like, okay, he's leading the group. I'm gonna apply and I'm gonna see if I get a spot. And I'm gonna spend some time in this group, learning whatever I need to learn. And to me, that's mentorship. Like, to me, that's mentorship, and that started a little over a year ago.
Okay.
And even till this day, like Ben and I still look to Ben for mentorship. If I have questions, I send him. I send it his way, right? The other guy that comes to mind is Dan Harrison. He's a financial consultant and coach. And yeah, I met Dan a while ago. Actually, he co-owns this company, or this initiative, I should say, called SOGO, which stands for So Good. They
Okay.
do these amazing events. I'm not sure if you heard of them.
I have.
However, Dan is like this financial guru, and finance is it's a bit of a sensitive, or has been a bit of a sensitive topic in my life. You know a little bit about my story around finances, and so the beautiful thing about mentorship is it's deeply tied to something in your life that you want to grow in, right?
For
And
sure.
so I sought out mentorship through Dan because I knew that he had a skill, he knew how to solve a problem, and that problem just so happens to be mine.
Yeah.
And so a mentorship grew out of that, and it even evolved and expanded from that point. I started investing in his coaching services, in his products, all that stuff. So yeah, but it started as a mentorship.
Very cool. And I think
Yeah.
I do think that's very important, and I'm glad that you said it. Of, there's people out there addressing the issues that you're struggling with, right? And I think finding a very pointed mentorship and relationship is important, right? Where it's, I want to address this in my life, and finding somebody who has experience or has gone through something similar. And so, just I guess to share on my side, I have had what are, I would say, fairly structured mentorship relationships, and they've all been around business actually. And my first one being my first district manager when I started my painting business while I was in university, and he was kind of the first person to teach me about business in general, right? And so a lot of those foundational early building blocks were through him, sorry. And then the next year, or next 3 years after that, my district manager left the company, and I started working very closely with the owner of the company. And that was, building on a higher level of the business as a whole, running things, organizing things, just like a different perspective. Instead of more hands-on, a lot more hands-off, managing, delegating. And then my last mentorship relationship was, funny enough, organized through my university, Mount Royal, where they had a mentorship program, and we were randomly paired up, and that led to 4 years of really intense mentorship, and we became very close. And that was, I would say, even again, focused on business and taking it to a new level of, going broader, going deeper, having more responsibility, a lot of different fields, things of that nature. And so, yeah, mine have been a lot more structured and less stumbled upon. It was almost like going into that relationship, it was already set up that way.
Yeah, I got a question for you actually around like, because that sounds really interesting to me around the structured approach. And so how, a couple of those ones that you mentioned like earlier on in your professional life, how did you approach it? Like, was it something where you sought out the mentorship, or was it them approaching you saying, hey, I'd love to mentor you? Like, how did that all blossom?
And, for the first two, it wasn't even necessarily spoken outright of like, oh, like, would you like me to mentor you? It was a lot more of just the activities, right? Without a label. And I would say, and probably what I've really leaned into and really tried to harness, because it was always a natural thing for me, is my curiosity, right? And so harnessing it in the form of, I want to know more. I want more responsibility. I want to know how this works. I want to not just do it, I want to understand it. And because of my personality being that way, and wanting to progress, I would say, whatever it might be, it kind of led to those relationships, of like them giving me more responsibility, them teaching me more, because I was willing and I wanted to do it and I wanted to learn it.
Yeah, I love that, man. And one thing that's coming to me right now is it's such a beautiful act of courage for anybody wanting to put their hand up for mentorship.
For sure.
And you said a word there, curiosity. And I feel like when someone puts their hand up and says, I want to be mentored. It is them saying, I'm going to set my ego aside. I don't know everything, and I need somebody to show me what I can't currently see myself. I think that is such a beautiful thing. I'm not saying that it's always like that, but I would say underneath the layers, when someone puts their hand up for mentorship, a part of them is like, I'm done saying I know, and now I want to say, what can I learn and who can I learn this from?
For sure. And I love that. And what I would say to that is I think that's how you need to approach mentorship to actually reap the benefits. Because
Yeah.
the flip side of the coin for me is people looking for mentorship to purely advance themselves. And what I mean
Wow.
by that is, like this person is higher than me in the organization. And if I set up this relationship to be mentored by them, then they're more likely to promote me. Or, they know a whole bunch of people, and the only reason I want to be mentored by them is so that they'll introduce me to other people so that I can climb the social ranks. And I think that's where a lot of people run into issues is they're not actually trying to learn from somebody. They're
Yeah.
doing it to purely benefit their standing or their stature.
Yes. Yeah. And would you say, I guess maybe this is a tough question, is like, what do you think about, how does, like, if you were a mentor, how would you feel that out, you think, if someone's reaching out to you?
Yeah, I think that comes just through conversation. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the more, and some people are better at it than others, of actually meeting and feeling it out of like, is this person actually here to learn, or is this person, here to get something from me?
Yeah.
And just, having those human instincts of which is it. And you can be wrong, right? But I think I don't have any other perspective other than, using your emotional intelligence to see, is this person being genuine with you or not?
Yeah. And even to add on to your response there is, if you were in the mentor position and there's someone knocking on your door, to ask them a good questions about why they want mentorship and then feel it from there.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of gone over this a little bit with each of us sharing how we found mentors, but are there other ways that you found some of your other mentors, right? Because for me, it's always, like I said, been very structured.
Yeah.
It's been either a boss or, for me, it was actually a mentorship program that paired me up. What are some
Yeah.
other ways that you found mentors?
Yeah, honestly, and this is something that people look past a lot, but look into your immediate network of colleagues. It could just be a friend. It could be a friend who exhibits or embodies, maybe a personality trait or a skill set or something that you really admire about them. And you could literally reach out to them and be like, hey, I'd love for you to mentor me around this subject. Right?
For
So
sure.
it could, like, you mentioned Darnell. You gave him the shout out about asking about this mint. He's going to be watching this, right? I look up to Darnell for his financial intelligence and awareness. And I sat down with Darnell once and he showed me the ins and outs of how he manages his money, how he spends his money, how he saves, and everything. And when I sat down with him, I felt like that was a mentor mentee relationship. And it wasn't, there wasn't labels, like you kind of mentioned earlier. There wasn't labels, but I reached out. I was like, hey, this is something I struggle with and I need some support. And Darnell was that for me. And so, and Darnell is in my immediate network as a colleague, as a friend. So I would say one method is to look directly into your current community. And it could be somebody that is just right under your nose. I would say so often people look way too big sometimes, and they're reading a book, and let's say like Lewis Howes or Tim Ferriss, and like, well, I want Tim Ferriss to be my mentor, and I'm going to reach out to Tim and see if I can get one-on-one mentorship. And I think that's a great mentality, right? However, some people let's do, it's always the and factor. Let's do that. And let's also look in our immediate network. And guys like Tim Ferriss or Lewis Howes or Deepak Chopra, like those big names, they put out books and content and podcasts for a reason. And those platforms can also be seen as mentors, because we have to think big here, right? It's like a mentor isn't just a human being. A mentor could be a book. A mentor could be a podcast such as yours. A mentor could be whatever, right? I think that whatever it is, if the person that created it with the intention to support and help other people grow, expand, evolve, to look deeper, that is a form of mentorship in a way. And so, and to answer your question again in a different way, is like, what books are you reading? What podcasts are you wanting to listen to, right? And to go even one step deeper, what areas in your life do you want to pay more attention to, and then look for the book from that place, then look for the podcast from that place, so that it's a little bit more aligned and we're not just shooting for the stars, right?
For sure. And I love that. And that's actually a perfect segue into two of the different types of mentorships I wanted to talk about. And that first one, when you're talking about the relationship with Darnell, right, is that the idea of co-mentorship, right, where it doesn't need to be somebody super above you necessarily, where it can be somebody that's, say, in the same sort of place in their life, but might be stronger in one area than you, and you're stronger in another area than them, right? And that co-mentorship of helping each other out or just giving each other advice, right, is a really interesting one, and was actually opened up to me through our men's group. And I think it might have been you that actually pointed it out, of like, that's the point of the group, is that we are codependent, and some days you're going to be higher, some days you're going to be lower, but we lean on each other. It doesn't need to be a one-way relationship, right?
Yeah.
It can be that equal relationship of both giving, both taking.
Exactly. At the end of the day, we're all, nobody's perfect. However, everyone's got different experiences in different areas. One thing that I've noticed around my experience with mentorship is the further that I've progressed in my life in like self-development and personal growth, the more specialized mentorship I would seek. So I could remember maybe even some earlier mentors. It wasn't anything specialized, like he or she was good at finance, or he or she was good at mindset, right? It was kind of like this person just embodied a personality and a character that I just love, and I just want to learn from them and about life in general. So, but as I progressed more and more, it's just interesting observation that I'm literally making right now. You just look for more specialized as you go.
For sure. And it's almost like narrowing down your needs, right? Because it could have been at that point in your life when you were looking for those, broad mentors, you were still finding your way in everything, right? And as you progressed in some areas, some other areas fell behind a little bit, and you needed more focus on them.
Yeah. So question for you, are
Yeah.
you, obviously outside of the amazing podcast that you have that is teaching so many people so many lessons, are you a mentor directly to anybody at this moment?
It's an interesting question, because I very much so stay away from labels a lot of time.
Yeah.
Right? Where not necessarily with the pure intent.
Yes.
And I don't even necessarily think of it that way, right? I more think of it as I give certain people in my life space, right? And for whatever they need. And, sometimes people will, I've mentioned it a couple times, where a lot of times I have been the emotional rock in the people's lives around me.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think in some ways you could call that almost the mentorship relationship of holding that space and helping them walk through emotions. but not set up that way, right? Of just, I'm here for you if you need me, and I'll give you what I can. Um, as I've progressed a little bit more in my professional career, I have had people ask me questions and learn from me, and things of that nature. But again, it's never labeled, and it's it's almost actually interesting on the professional side where I still feel like I have so far to go.
Yes.
Maybe that's why I don't see myself as a quote unquote mentor, is because
Uh,
I can share what I know right now with you, but I still know there's so much I don't know. And so
yes.
I'll let you know what I think at this moment, but I know this isn't the answer. So
Right.
hopefully it helps you, but I'm still growing. And so um, I'll do the best that I can almost.
Yeah. You would say that to them in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're,
And a lot of times, and trying to pick out of, is that insecurity talking or is that actually the truth? And it's different in different situations.
fair.
But, just letting them know that I don't have all the answers, and this is what I think, and this is what I've experienced. And I guess I try to do it a lot more so in the way that I learn, where
Yeah.
I always try to distill the lesson,
Yeah.
right? It's not of, if this specific thing happens, you should do this action. It's more of the why, of why, when this happened, did you do this action, and distill that why instead of the specific action. So I can apply it in the future and trying to explain that to people.
Yeah, I love that. And much respect for prefacing to people that you don't have all the answers, and whatever I provide you is my best, or to the scale, or to the scope of my knowledge. I think that's such a beautiful thing to preface to people, because otherwise they're going to be, I don't know, it really sets a good tone for false expectations that may have been planned or walked into. And so I think that's really great that you preface that, man.
Thank you. And that actually, just when you were saying that, reminded me of the conversation that we were having on the weekend with the King of Hearts, and
Ah,
the idea that your father is perfect, right? Is the strongest, the
mm,
biggest, the smartest, the whatever it might be. And when you're young, and that's your idea of him, and as you grow up, realizing that he's just a man, right?
yes,
And applying that to mentors of, if you idolize them too much, sometimes they can let you down, because they're just people too. And although they might be successful, or at least in your eyes, whatever that means, it doesn't mean that they're perfect, right? And
yes.
not, saving yourself from that crash down of, oh, they're not perfect, so they're not, worth anything that they told me now.
Boom. Well said. Yeah. You know, in a sense, it's like when you walk into, I think, anything, like whether it's a mentorship or a relationship, or an example you used around like, parenting, is to not pedestal anybody.
Yeah.
And even changing up the language, I look up to maybe I admire.
Love
Like,
that.
I admire that you have your skill set around finances. I would love to pick your brain on that. Versus I look up to this person, because I think there's a psychological thing with our language too. Is when we say I look up to someone, it means that we're putting them up on a pedestal, meaning what we're just saying, that we could have these expectations for somebody that might be disappointed.
For sure. Yeah. Removing the perfection from it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And adding a little bit more of that realness, that human. I like to use the word humanness,
for sure.
because that word humanness has this, I don't know, it's like it's changeable, it's moldable, it's there's flaws to it, and I think it's beautiful in that way.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know whether you see yourself this way or not, I know that you mentor a lot of us in the group. Um, Again, without necessarily the label in the men's group, I'm talking. And, I imagine that you mentor others as well. And how do you approach that when you're mentoring others? Is there anything specific that comes to mind, or even the way that you mentor them?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll start with, I'm going to start by explaining my first experience with being a mentor.
Okay.
My first experience was through Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And I'm actually still a big brother. And my mentee, his name is Joey. And that was my first experience of having somebody kind of like watch my every move. And it's interesting because Joey was so young when when we started our mentorship. He was 9 years old and now he's 15. And at 9 years old, he didn't choose Big Brothers, Big Sisters. His mom chose for him.
Mm.
Right. And so there's a different energy there. Right. And yeah, you know, I do an annual review with Big Brothers Big Sisters every year, and they always ask the same questions, and I think that's great. But one of the questions that they ask me is, what's something that you've learned with your time with Joey? And every year, because they ask the same questions, I wanna challenge myself and give the different answers every year. However, I want to be authentic and honest with it, and it always seems to be the same answer. And the answer for me was always two things. It was the most effective mentorship is to embody what you teach, is to practice what you teach yourself, like in your own life when no one's looking, when Joey isn't looking. Am I being the person that I am showing him when we are in person? Am I living that out like day to day? That's so important.
Yeah.
And the second thing would be, it kind of has something to do with that pedestal thing that we were talking about, is that when we establish a relationship where people aren't pedestaling each other, both, regardless of the label, both people learn from each other, regardless of who the mentor is or who the mentee is. And so one of my consistent answers to Big Brothers Big Sisters during the annual review has always been, Joey teaches me so much about myself. He teaches me how to be a kid. He teaches me how to not take life too so seriously, and all that stuff, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, like those would be two really big things. Does that answer your question?
I love both of those. Yeah. And as you were saying, the first one was what came to mind for me. It was, show them how to live. Don't tell them how to live. Right.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And the other thing, and yes, I have other I don't like using labels either,
Yeah.
but I coach and I mentor other people as well, even today. And the one approach that I really love is when we have a meeting, I ask them as much questions as they're asking me. That's a really good, like, again, back to, like, I don't have all the answers, but maybe I can help you reveal the answers that you might already know yourself. And I'm just that mirror for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
Love that.
that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't like a knowledge dump on that person, but just like, you know, asking them questions they've never been asked before to reveal something that they've never realized they had the entire time.
For sure. I like to think of that as almost revealing their blind spots, right?
Exactly.
Making them look at the blind spot where they haven't seen it before.
Exactly. Exactly.
Love
So,
that.
yeah. I've never been asked that question before. So as I'm saying all of this to you, Jared, it feels quite new to me in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's great.
So the next kind of mentorship I wanted to talk about is what I've decided to call indirect mentorship. And you actually brought it up earlier of, the people that are putting out books, or even people that are dead, right? Like, I know that you just read a book on Marcus Aurelius, right? And
Yes.
so the idea first came to me. I was watching one of Gary Vee's interviews with Amy Landino. And so she was basically talking about how she is part of their speaking bureau. And one of the biggest misconceptions is how much direct time she got to spend with Gary. And she brought up the idea that, you know, you don't necessarily need to be in the same room and have direct interaction with somebody to still be mentored by them, right? And so looking up to those big characters that, like you were saying, put out content, put out books, and actually finding mentorship in them. Just your any thoughts on that, or people that you've done that with?
Yeah, my thoughts on that is we live in a world now where we have the internet and we have social media like Instagram and whatnot. And, the person that you've looked up to for so long that is quote unquote unreachable, they have some form of social media. So they're accessible in 2 clicks of a button.
Mm-hmm.
So to feel inspired, to get a jolt of motivation from an author or a thought leader, you can instantly access that now. It's in the palm of our hands, and we're I don't know if we live in the. Would you say that we still live in the age of information, or is that past now?
I would say we still do. I mean,
Yeah,
to be honest, I don't have a lot of background on that term other than very surface level, but I would say so. I would say we have way more information than we've ever had, and it's continually growing.
it is, and because it's continually growing, there could be a lot that's thrown at us. Like, there could be a lot that's coming at our way all the time. And so my invitation or my challenge to the people listening here is be like hella intentional about who you're listening to and why, because there could be like 1,000 business coaches, creating content and trying to get at you with information. But if we can do our part and distill it down to who resonates with us the most and why am I looking for this in the first place, it would make life a lot easier when we actually want to start integrating the information that we're seeking so badly.
Mm-hmm.
Because information is just information, right? Information is just information. One mentor can give you that, 3 mentors can give you this, a thought leader can do this. You can read 3 books and then listen to 4 podcasts.
Yeah.
And that could be a lot, because at the end of the day, the intention integrate, is to integrate, not to consume. And so I would say that's the thought that's coming up for me is, yeah, like there's a lot of books, a lot of information, and a lot of thought leaders. Just do your best to distill and narrow it down to a select few, and go deep with 2 podcasts, go deep with 2 authors, and maybe 1 thought leader for now. And then maybe use that as the benchmark. Is that's always going to be the maximum amount that you'll have, and then you'll just rotate. So there's never any point where you're listening to 8 different podcasts.
Yeah. I love the idea of what you were saying of, not just collecting information for information's sake, right? Of actually integrating that information. And I think that is what a lot of people try to do, is that, if I skim, 100 books, it'll get me farther than rather than actually understanding a couple of them. The only thing I will say to that too is I do believe people are very different, and not to go away from that. And some people do need to move, to have many things at a little bit shallower than a couple of going very deep. But I think even to those people, the idea rings the same of, actually understanding, integrating that information that you're taking in, however you're doing it, rather than just collecting information for information's sake.
Yeah, I love that angle that you just had. Like, sure, like you can go and touch on more. However, are you integrating? Like that bottom line at the end of the day, are you integrating?
Love that.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what is the most important aspect in getting the most out of a mentorship relationship?
Yeah, I would say come prepared. Come prepared. If you're having a mentorship meeting, come prepared with questions. Lots of questions for sure. Come with come with to the meeting knowing where you want, like knowing what you want to kind of receive as well, because the questions can be a multitude of different things, but if you can narrow it, if you can like niche it down to like a specific thing in your life where you want to uncover or discover a little bit more, know that, and then the questions will follow, right?
Yeah.
Consistency, I think, is really huge. I think like meeting a mentor, like, without any structure is defeating the purpose, and I'm just a big advocate of structure and consistency, because I feel like when it comes to learning and integrating, it just consistency is such an important part of the recipe. It's a very crucial ingredient
Mhm.
to success. And so when you are meeting with a mentor, or if you're a mentor and you're taking on some people that you want to coach, or you want to mentor, I would say come with a plan. Come with a really good plan on once a month for the next 6 months. Create that container.
Yeah. Love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And just for me, my perspective has actually been added on to just from this conversation, which is cool.
Sweet.
Um, and so originally it was more focused on that pedestal part of not putting them on the pedestal, but the part that we talked about that you said, of humbling yourself, right?
Yes.
Of coming in and almost removing your ego from that so that you can truly hear what it is they're saying.
Yes.
And now adding on to that though, on the pedestal part, and they seem like they're opposite directions. However, also realizing that the exact way that they did things will not work for you either. And because you're a different person, it's a different time, you're facing different challenges, you can still have those overarching ideas and learn a ton from them without copying them, without copying exactly step for step what they did. And so kind of balancing those two parts, I believe is important.
I really love that. And yeah, you just reminded me of it's like a principle or a philosophy that I've heard in the past around asking and receiving feedback. And I learned it from the leader. He's the founder of the Samurai Brotherhood. His name is Tirtha. And I was at a men's retreat once, and we were doing this exercise where a lot of men would give you feedback. And it's called the King's Chair. You've been a part of that before, a part of our
Yep.
men's group. And one thing that Tirtha said that really stood out to me was, when you're receiving feedback, just try it on, like definitely try it on, like put it on like it's a t-shirt, and kind of like you're in the shopping mall and you're shopping for new clothes, try the t-shirt on. If you don't like it, don't buy it, take it off, it's all good. And I think to walk into a mentorship relationship with that mindset and mentality, or whatever advice or perspective you're given, to not take everything at face value. Try it on, try it out, and maybe it's not for you. And I think that's quite respectful.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but that analogy, which you introduced me to, has stuck with me ever since, and has been a big part of my life. And actually came up in conversation just last week with somebody else, and using
Nice.
that analogy for them of trying it on and you know, if you don't like it, you can always take it off, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that, and thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, like, and then, but actually, like, truly trying it on, like
Yeah,
putting a shirt on, looking at it from different angles,
yeah,
like it's like literally like as if you were shopping. And so, yeah, I would say, and that really does, you're right, it really does, mitigate the pedestal thing a bit.
for sure. So now my question to you,
Yeah,
which might be a little bit of an interesting one, so if you need a second to think, but
cool.
how do you know when to move on from a mentorship relationship?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think I don't think it's as linear as, what, like, you don't know, you'll foresee a specific time when that mentorship is done. I would say what's important is to have check-in points throughout that time, right? And let's say you and your mentorship partner decided to work together for 6 months. Just pick a couple of check-in points along the way. Hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is this still working for you? Are you still getting value out of this? And
Mhm.
then you kind of shift and pivot from there. I think that's healthy. And I think it's also healthy to, if you decide to end it early, I think that's fine as well. But those check-in points are really important. Yeah.
I love that. And yeah, I mean, I guess I think that the check-ins are super important. And from my point of view, it's interesting where because my, you know, again, mentor-mentee relationships haven't been linear, my answer to when to end them is almost linear to counterbalance that.
Mm,
And linear in a sense, I guess.
yeah.
Of for me, when I know it's time to move on, is when it is the number will be arbitrary, but let's say when I've learned 90% of what I feel like I can learn from them.
Yeah.
Because there will always be very specific nuances, very specific situations that you'll never get to 100%.
Yes.
However, the energy in when that stops being less than the value that you're getting out of it, for me, by a wide margin, that's for me when it is time to move on.
Yeah. I love that.
And I think though the part for my relationships that where that's been missing is that check-in point where it
Mm,
hasn't been that two-way communication in a lot of them, just again probably because they aren't as linear as a lot of other ones.
yeah.
And something that just now talking with you is something that I want to make sure I add on, right?
Yes.
And I think the other important thing that you alluded to is that just because the quote unquote mentorship relationship is over, doesn't mean that your relationship with that person is now over too,
No, of
right?
course
It,
not.
it can shift, and it can shift and still be a very positive one. It's just different, right?
Yeah.
And the expectations on both sides and what you're now getting out of that relationship have shifted.
Yep, exactly. And quickly, and I love your response, and like quickly going back to something that I mentioned earlier around how it's so important that you ask really good questions, whether you're the mentor or the mentee. That allows the relationship to further grow,
Hmm.
always bringing new questions to the table, right? Because that 90%, if you ask good questions, that 90% of what you got out of it could actually be stretched a little bit more, right? When you ask questions that you've never asked before.
Yeah,
But if a person shows up at a mentorship meeting, let's say you're the mentee, and you're just like, okay, what do you have to tell me today? That kind of like puts a little bit of a ceiling on that, right?
yeah,
And it is also, I think, the responsibility of the mentor to also be asking questions and revealing as well.
for sure.
Um, And secondly, to your point about how it can evolve even if it ended, my relationship with Dan Harrison how that mentorship turned into me purchasing his conscious wealth course, which turned then into me joining his mastermind team. So it like totally evolved. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. And the phrase that comes to mind too is at one point, the teacher becomes the student, or the other way around, however it goes, right? Of
Yeah.
at a certain point, you need to kind of spread your own wings, and you need to fly and figure things out for yourself and put in different situations. And so I do think that that is a very important part too.
Yeah.
And that sometimes that can still be done within the framework of a mentorship, and sometimes it can't. And I think that's just a case by case basis of how flexible that relationship is, and how much it can flow, and how much it can change,
Mm,
with how you both are changing.
yeah. I want to, yeah, that quote that you used reminded me of another quote,
Okay.
from a student and teacher. And the quote, I actually want to squash it because I think it's outdated and I think it's just old. But
Okay.
the quote is, well, the teacher will appear when the student is ready. And
Okay.
I want to squash that a little bit because, you and I, we challenge the status quo, right? And so I would say a reimagination of that quote, our version would be the teacher will appear when the student is willing, not when the student is ready. Because we're never 100% ready. But if we are willing, regardless of how ready we feel, the lesson, I call it, the lesson will be there. The lesson will be there for sure.
I like that.
So
I like keep going.
yeah, willingness. Yeah.
I The only thing I do want to challenge a little bit on that is
Yeah.
I do think it's both.
Let's hear it.
Where, I think that for sure, I think willing is a lot more accurate than ready. But I also think that there is a level, when I hear ready, a level of capability, right?
Hmm.
Of has that student gotten to the point where they can actually receive the lessons that are being taught by the
Hmm.
teacher.
Yes.
And so I think it is a little bit of both. I think they have to be willing, but they also have to be at a certain point where those lessons will actually land, and they'll actually be capable enough to take them and run with them.
That's a good challenge. Well, then, if that was also, then I would also add to that and say, for whoever's listening and is like pondering this concept right now, don't let readiness be attached to just a feeling, right? Because our feelings are always changing, and it's like weather, it's always changing and evolving and transforming. But if we attach readiness to a feeling, we're going to be running around in circles the whole time. But like you said, if ready was more attached to factual preparedness, then I think that's beautiful.
Hmm. Yeah,
Does
I
that make
love
sense?
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, when you were saying that, and is this the same line of thinking of, it might not be that the person feels 100% ready 100% of the time. And
Yes.
just because you're not feeling like that doesn't mean you're actually not ready.
Exactly. Exactly. And like, if we were to, zoom out a little bit here too, it's like people do, they do hold themselves to this perfection standard. I have to be 100% ready before I take action.
Yeah.
I have to be 100% ready. All the lights need to be green before I step on the gas.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that sometimes we can break the rules a little bit and run a yellow. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah,
I 100% agree with that.
yeah, yeah.
Love that.
I love that.
Just as we're finishing up here, are there any parting shots, anything that we didn't get to talk about, that you wanted to leave with everybody?
Yeah, I would say that I think this is just an extra reminder: is a mentorship isn't always an individual or a person. So with that thought in mind, always in some platform or way or your own way, be involved in mentorship of some sorts. And it isn't about consuming, it's about integrating. It isn't
Love
about
that.
consuming, it's about integrating. I really want that to land.
For sure. And I love that a lot. And mine's right along the same path of just reimagining and being more flexible of what mentorship looks like
Yeah,
and who is a mentor. And so just having that flexibility, reimagining it, and growing with it. So
yeah, yeah. Love that, man. That's great.
thank
What
you.
a great conversation.
Yeah, it was truly amazing. Thanks again for joining me.
Awesome.
Until next time, can't wait to see you again.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, dude.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.